Hello everybody and welcome to the Spirits channel. I'm Paul James Caden, and today I want to talk to all of you about the devil, the Birdman, and the little man in your room. You know, at the ripe old age of 58 years old, I've had a lot of experience with the paranormal and the supernatural. I have always been very sensitive to, uh, the spirit world, as they say, and I really began seeing spirits when I was around 3 years old. I started seeing things and experienced things I couldn't explain. And even before then, I saw like a lot of shadowy shapes and kind of like a presence in my room. And to me, it was kind of normal. It wasn't always scary up until a point where things started to get a little bit weird here and there. I always say, the paranormal, the supernatural, it's not always about ghosts and goblins and spooky things. It can also be very positive, very loving. It can point us toward the light. But even so, there can be things that seem to be a bit malevolent or spooky, and they don't seem to have our best interest at heart. And why are they there? Why do they come to us? Why do we see them? And why is it that there's a large majority of people that have experienced something unknown between the ages of 3 and 12 years old? This seems to be the ripe age where if someone's going to start experiencing the paranormal, they'll begin to see things. And generally what it starts with, and I'm very curious about this, if any of you out there watching this video, whether it be right after it's made or a year from now, 10 years from now, if you've experienced something like what I'm about to talk about, please leave a comment below. Let me know if you're somebody who has had this experience that a lot of children have, and I've had it, where these beings will show up in your room just out of nowhere. I'm talking to a friend of mine online right now who had a lot of experiences in his life, and I had similar experiences. I've talked to a lot of people that had similar experiences, and I've read a lot of accounts of people that had these same kinds of experiences, where between that age of 3 and 12, generally something happens. Generally, like I said, this is when people will begin to experience the paranormal in some way. Now, for little children between the ages of 3, 5, 6, somewhere in that ballpark, it usually starts out with someone showing up in the room. And this someone is either a very friendly man or a woman, a child who is like an imaginary friend. It could be a being of light, classic angel with the feathery wings. It could be extraterrestrial in nature, where it would look like the Greys or other strange extraterrestrial type beings. And then of course, there's the little man. The little man who, he isn't scary. He generally tells people a lot of things, and he's there for a while, but they don't remember what he said. And generally he always leaves them with, there will come a time when you'll remember everything I told you. And more than once I've heard the occasion where this little man tells people that his name is Elmer. Now, is this the same Elmer visiting various children all over the world at various times throughout the years? Or is this some race or species of spiritual being who just, they choose that name? It's very elfin, it's very non-threatening. Hi, my name is Elmer. Why Elmer? I had a cousin whose name was Jimmy, and Jimmy died in a car accident in his 20s. And when Jimmy was in his late teens, early 20s, and this is a strange one, he was older, and he said he was talking to a little man in his room. he lived with his mother, his two sisters, who were twins. And he talked about this little man who would come out of this hole in his wall and talk to him. And he said the little man was green. And his sisters tell the story that one night they were in his room and he said, "Do you want to meet the little man?" And if I'm not mistaken, I can't swear to this, but I think he said the little green man's name was Elmer. But he asked his sisters one night, do you want to meet him? Do you want to meet the little man? And they said sure. They all thought he was joking or, fooling around, or, he smoked marijuana, so they thought maybe he was just, having, a marijuana moment when he talked about this little man. But Jimmy proceeded to call into the hole, "Come on out, my sisters want to meet you." And they heard something starting scratching and clawing, they said, up the wall toward the hole till it got right on the edge of the hole. And they said they didn't wait around to see who or what it was. They just took off and ran out of the room. And it was not long after that my cousin ended up dying in a car accident. Now, the funny thing about these visitations in the bedroom, whether it's the little man or they seem to be extraterrestrial in nature, is that they're always followed by the individual many times being very exposed to the paranormal. They start seeing spirits, ghosts, demons, all these, kind of creepy things, poltergeist type activity. And also many times it leads to the alien abduction experience, especially if the little man or the being showing up in the room is extraterrestrial in nature and looks like, one of the Greys, or kind of alien as we would describe it. And so this will go into sometimes an abduction scenario that happens for a period of years, then it stops, and sometimes it begins at childhood and goes for a lifetime. So these encounters don't generally seem to lead to anything that's positive. People that encounter these things generally also have a lot of health issues throughout their lives, and many end up passing away early. Some are faced with life-threatening diseases, and but they end up, even though they're terminal and it's one thing after another, they somehow survive. So what are these beings showing up in people's rooms, and why do these things happen after people encounter these little men, these seeming extraterrestrials? Now, I say all that to say this. Don't get me wrong, because not all beings that show up in a person's bedroom are bad. Some people have very positive angelic experiences. I had a couple experiences with something showing up in my bedroom. One was not so good, and one was very good. One was very angelic in nature, and I wrote a book about it, and it's something that affected my life very positively up to this date. It's why I'm sitting here, well, one of the big reasons why I'm sitting here in front of this camera right now, talking to all of you about the paranormal and the spiritual. This experience was very different because it was always an experience that kind of nudged me very gently toward God, the love of God, and even having more faith in Christ, and I found that to be very interesting. The other experience, however, not so much. This one happened when I was in the second grade. I woke up one night, middle of the night, and I thought I was bleeding because it felt like there was something running in my eyes, blurring my vision. I was wiping my eyes, wiping my forehead, looking at my hands, but nothing was there. And suddenly this ooze seemed to stop. And I noticed I was going to wake up my brother, and we shared a room at the time, and we slept in a full-size bed that we shared. I turned to wake him up, and I noticed it wasn't my brother laying next to me. It was a very thin, gaunt body that had a very large head with this kind of black hair sticking up all over. That was almost kind of like it was balding, and there were patches of it sticking up out of the head. And this head had no face. And he would just lay there and make these strange snorting noises. So naturally, I was afraid to wake him up. The next thing I noticed is that there's someone standing at the foot of the bed. Interestingly, a little man. But this just wasn't a little man. This was a little man about 3 feet tall, maybe a little better, 3.5, and he looked like the devil. He wasn't a scary devil. He looked kind of cartoonish in nature, but still a devil. And suddenly behind him was this table with a chessboard on it, and sitting at the table was this other being that had a very large rimmed hat on his head. And this being was also about 3.5 feet tall. And this being had a bird face. I couldn't see the face clearly, but I could see the beak, this long beak-like, appendage coming out from under the hat. And the little devil being proceeded to walk over to the table, sit down, and they start playing chess, the devil and the Birdman. Then suddenly, out of the walls, and I know all this sounds crazy, but stick with me, out of the walls came all of these little imp-like creatures that were like a fluorescent pink in color, and they were running all over the room. At this point, and all this happened very quickly, my brother, the little devil, the Birdman, the other beings, I suddenly think I'm going to run out of the room. I'm going to run into my parents' room and get my mother. As soon as I have the thought that I'm going to run, the little devil man points at the doorway, and it was almost like the same glop that was oozing into my eyes in the beginning started falling in great amounts from the top of the doorway to the top of the threshold. The bedroom door was open. And it started to pile up very quickly, in this kind of like oozing mound, in the bottom of the door. So I would have to run through it or over top of it, to get out of the room. And I was afraid, this glop is dripping down. There's this mound in the doorway. And to top that all off, there was a dresser next to the bed. And from the side of the dresser comes, again, this maybe 3.5-foot bird-like creature, completely black with a yellow beak, a yellow bill that almost looked like a duck's bill. And it would come up and lay its head on this edge of the bed like it was looking at me. And almost like it was preventing me from getting out of the bed. And I thought a couple times to kick it, but I felt dread when I thought about kicking it. Like if I kick this thing, something bad is going to happen. So I didn't kick it. I didn't retaliate. I just sat there in terror, watching, looking at the thing that was my brother laying next to me. And finally, after this played out for a while, I let out a shriek, calling my mother, who got up and turned on the light, and everything just kind of went wavy, like static in a TV, and it was gone. Now, the funny thing about this is I'm going to say about 6 months later, 8 months within the contents of a year, me and my brother were at my grandmother's house listening to records. We had little 45 records we played on the turntable. We were in the living room listening to records, and my brother, and now I never mentioned this, I never said anything to anybody, but now my brother tells me out of nowhere that some years before that I found out he had a similar dream. The devil, only his devil was tall. There was no Birdman, but there were the fluorescent pink imp-like creatures running throughout the room. My brother thought about running out of the room. The devil pointed at the doorway, and it was like a static or a zigzag static in the doorway, covering the doorway as if preventing him from getting out. Also, the bird-like creature that was black with the long bill coming up and laying its beak on the side of the bed and looking at him. Identical. I remember I was just a kid when he told me this, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. And I remember saying, oh my God, really, and then we talked about this, and this has been a mystery in our lives for years. From time to time, we would still talk about this and say, what was that? We called it, the devil dream, the devil experience. What was it? What was this devil in our room when we were just little kids? And again, it makes me think, what are these beings that show up in people's rooms? The so-called, extraterrestrial looking beings, the little man, the various beings that show up in people's bedrooms at night. And after a lot of years of experiences and research and reading other people's encounters, here is my estimation of what's going on. Now, here's where we get a little bit spiritual, maybe a little bit into the realm of religion. So if that's not your bag, you can cut it off now and draw your own conclusions. But I think, as I told my friend that I'm talking to online, I certainly think there are those of us who are more sensitive to what we call the spirit world. We see them, we sense them, and they certainly see and sense us. They know we can see, they know we can sense. And particularly children, all children are very sensitive. And most people you talk to will say between that ages of like 3 and 8, they saw something significant, even if that was the only thing they ever encountered in their lives when it comes to the paranormal and the supernatural. So I believe these things know. They present themselves to children and sometimes adults, that's not out of the question. But I think there's a point in all of our lives where we will encounter the dark and the light. Why see the devil and the Birdman and all this creepy stuff, in our rooms, the little man, or, shadowy figures that sit on the foot of people's beds at night and never say a word, but, people are terrified. I hypothesize that maybe what we call the darkness, the dark side, the evil, makes a play for us at that time. Either trying to get us into fear and dread, or maybe to ignite our curiosity about the paranormal and the occult and try to pull us in a direction of going down that path. Because a lot of people go down that path when they have those experiences. And again, that path is riddled with a lot of illness, misfortune, alien abduction, poltergeist activity, early death, bad relationships, abusive relationships. It just seems to bring a cascade of negative energy into people's lives. So is that the reason why? Snuff out the light before they find the light. Or maybe get them to go down a path that will lead others down that path to deceive and destroy. Remember, that the saying from the Bible, that the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Is that the main mode of operation here? To steal, to kill, and to destroy? Because a lot of people who encounter these things, that's exactly what happens in their lives. Their health, their peace, their well-being is stolen. They're killed through accident, disease, death. Horrified, their peace, their courage, their faith is stolen through these alien abduction experiences, or horrific demonic type experiences that haunt them all their lives, literally haunt them. And some people, they lose their lives early through tragedy or disease. And trust me when I tell you this, there's a lot of people that happens to. A lot. There are some people who just experience these things and it kind of goes away and they're fine, but that others, it leads to a pathway and a trail of something that is not necessarily good. So I hypothesize that yes, these things are very likely what we call demons, the demonic. I believe demons can also be very possibly departed souls of human beings who make their choice to follow that darkness even after death. Remember, the word angel just means messenger. And we have accounts of people seeing angels who get messages from God, messages that are positive and life-saving and healing. But we also see people that get messages from deceased loved ones that do the same thing, save their lives, change their lives, even bring about, an unexplained healing. So in that case, the deceased loved one is the angel or the messenger from God. So might there be deceased human spirits who follow the darkness after death, and they become the messengers or the harbingers of the darkness or the evil. Now, there's certainly no way to say that's definitive, but it seems like it is a possibility or possibly even a probability when it comes to the paranormal. So, these things do not seem to be, very favorable toward us if we get sucked into their realm, into the trap, if you could call it that they're laying for us, unsuspecting human beings. Now, the interesting part of it is, and again, this is where it might get, a little bit spiritual / religious, a little bit deeper. If that's not your thing, feel free to shut off the video, go draw your own conclusions, contemplate what was said up to this point. But I have to say this. Again, I'm not a, religious person. I'm not into religion, organized religion. I'm into spirituality. I'm into seeking truth. That has been my motto for many years. I want to find as much truth as I can in this world while I'm here alive, as much spiritual truth as I can. As the old saying, what is truth? I want to know, if possible, what is the truth? And for me in my research, which has been very meticulous, very scientific at times, very much scrutinized, very much coming at it with skepticism many times. But I've always found in my research, in my experiences, which we'll talk about some of those at a later date, that yes, when we speak to these things in the name of Christ with authority, they seem to go away and it doesn't happen anymore. Whether that's hauntings, nighttime torments, alien abductions, whatever the case might be. Usually that seems to be the key where the victim is released. Now, I've read a lot of accounts and I've known a lot of people that would seek out, the shaman, the medicine man, the new age healer, all that sort of thing. And there would be the temporary fix and they would say, oh, I'm free. But then it would either come back even worse than it was before, or come back in an even more malevolent and confusing form of attack. So there are reoccurrences in many of the cases that I've read about, talked to people about, that would seek those outside alternatives. So it seems that the name of Christ seems to be the only permanent solution. And sometimes it's a battle, don't get me wrong, the spiritual battle, the spiritual warfare, but these things seem to cease at that point. And again, I have experiences that testify to that in my own life, which I'll talk about at another time. But again, there's a lot about the supernatural and the paranormal that we don't understand. And I don't think these are things that should be played with. If some strange being is showing up in our room, showing up in our home, or trying to approach us in some way, there's this modern day idea all spirits are friendly, and hey, just let them in because they're going to enlighten us. They're going to open us up spiritually and psychically and all this sort of thing, and that's very dangerous. We don't know who or what it is we're dealing with many times, and we should never open the door to a strange being that we don't know, even if he's a little innocent guy who calls himself Elmer. So folks, I hope you got something out of this. I hope you learned something from my experience in this brief conversation. It's one of the things I want to do on this channel, is talk about my experiences, cases I've read about, other people that I've talked to that had experiences. I want to start bringing, that's why I changed the channel name, the Spirits Channel, Portals to the Supernatural, because I want to bring all aspects of supernatural and paranormal into the channel and just start sharing some of the things that I know. Because I've noticed, I was just telling my wife this earlier, when you look these things up online, you can't find the information anymore. You can't find information online. You can't find the books unless you know the name of an old book and you purposely go searching for it. It's like this information is irrelevant to most people. It's fairy tales, it's nonsense, or they just don't care, they don't believe in it. And so if somebody experiences this type of thing, where do they find answers? Where do they find somebody that says, yes, I've experienced that too, or I know people that experience that type of thing, and here's what happened to them, or here's how they made it stop. And that's kind of what I want to make this channel about. Of course, the ITC work is always going to be the foundation of the channel, but I want to share other things as well for those who might be seeking. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you got something out of it. And again, please, if you experience something in your room, if you experience something that still has maybe an ongoing effect in your life, let me know below. Drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you and maybe talk to you a little bit and maybe give some steps to help end this if there's something that's like an ongoing torment or terror in your life. But even if you just experience something and there's no ongoing torment or terror, let me know what you experienced. Did something or someone show up in your room when you were a little kid? Who and what was it? What did they say? Did they remember? Do you remember it, or did they tell you you'll remember it at some future time? What was their name? Were they green? Were they just normal looking? Were they short? Were they tall? Was their name Elmer? Did anyone wake up to see a devil-like figure in the room with these strange little imp beings and maybe playing a game of chess with a 3.5-foot tall Birdman? Let me know if you experienced any of these things. So thank you for listening. I very much appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video, and I'm sorry the lighting is kind of making things a little dark. I should have closed that blind back there, but we live and we learn. So thank you again for listening. God bless you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.